What up, everybody? How is everyone doing today? One, two. Everybody hearing me all right? Where we got everyone coming from today? Hey, hey, hey. All right. People rolling in. Let me just minimize some of these windows I got going on here. Okay. So, how is everybody doing today on this beautiful Wednesday evening, Wednesday night, whenever time you're joining, Thursday morning? Y'all just roll in now, roll in. I see we currently have 49 people. Roll in. Indiana, USA, Kenya, Sweden, Chicago, USA, Kenya, Botswana, South Africa in the house, Virginia, Brazil. Yeah, y'all keep rolling in now, keep rolling in. If you have your questions, just save it for now because I see the chat's already blowing up with questions already, and I'm not going to scroll back up. So just save your questions. Save your questions. I'll get to them. Y'all shout out where you're from in the chat so I can see where we have folks from today. I know for folks in UK and Asia and Middle East, Africa. It's pretty late for you guys now over there, so I really do appreciate you taking the time to jump online. We're up to 65 people now. Keep rolling in, keep rolling in. Bulgaria, wow, that's awesome. Grenada, that's my Caribbean cousin right there. You know, Grenada, part of the Caribbean, and as you all know, I'm Jamaican. And we have Nigeria, Kuwait, Romania. Man, I so wish I could visit some of these places. I was at a Florida in the house of Florida. From Boston. You know, I'm moving to Florida in like a month. Yeah, so we're gonna be state buddies, man. Let me know where you at in Florida. Pennsylvania, California, Nigeria, Arkansas. I have a buddy who's actually studying classical piano performance at University of Arkansas. He's also from Jamaica. Paris, and Uganda. Mm-hmm. So Herbert says he's hearing an echo in my voice. Anyone else hearing an echo? Maybe what you're hearing is the vibrato on my voice. Let me check real quick. Anybody else hearing echoes? So I don't have any, let me just turn, yeah, I don't have any vibrato attached to my microphone in this setting. Guys, let me know if you're hearing any echo in my voice. Oh, y'all saying yes. Does that mean you're hearing echoes? What? All right, let me take a quick look at my settings to see where possibly echo is coming from. I'm going to keep talking, but I want you guys to let me know if and when the echo is gone. Let me know. I'm going to just check some stuff here. Make sure the echo is gone. Okay. And the echo in my voice. Let me know when the echo is gone. I'll say, Nelly said the echo is clear now. Is that good for everybody else? Echo's gone? Yeah, I know generally if the audio is being streamed twice, it will give an echo. So that's why I'm checking, because I have quite a bit of audio source going. So I want to make sure I'm not streaming anything twice. Lyndon Richardson, you still hearing echo? I'm seeing in the chat folks saying it's gone now. So maybe it was my, because I have a sort of a reverb in on my microphone. Close enough for jazz. Ah, y'all funny, y'all funny, y'all funny. Yeah. Wouldn't be coming from here. Let me see. I got my interface here. Make sure there's no reverb turned on or delay. Sounding better from y'all and guys? So question asked if the session will be available to view at a later stage. Yes. Once I complete the stream, then you'll be able to go back right away and rewatch it because YouTube stores all the stream. Yeah. Unfortunately, guys, I'm not able to see right away what would be causing my echo in my source, because the thing is I can't really hear from my end. I can't really hear the output audio. I set it so I don't hear the output audio. I can check one more quick thing. Audio preference. We may have to just roll with that, unfortunately. When I checked it earlier, there was no echoes. Mic check, 1, 2, test. Mic check, 1, 2. Mic check, 1, 2. Mic check, 1, 2. So right now I'm not hearing any audio echoes from my end. So I'm not sure, guys. Let me 1, 2, check. 1, 2, check. 1, 2, check. One, two, check. All right, so we'll just roll with that. Unfortunately, for those of you who are hearing an echo, I'm not able to pinpoint the issue right now. So sadly, going to have to roll the stream with some echoes today. All right. All right, let's get this party on the road. Echo's gone. Not sure what I did because all I've been doing is just sort of checking to see if I have any duplicate audio source being sent to you guys. I also did just remove all the effects from my vocal mic, from my clip-on mic, because I did have some compression, some noise gate and de-esser and all of that stuff, just to make the audio clean and clear for you guys, but apparently it's been sending an echo. Anyways, it's all good. I am checking the chat, brother. D de quoi? B de quoi? Or Dan quoi? I'm checking the chat. But anyway, now we have 105 people online. I just wanted to make sure everyone, or at least the majority of who's going to be here, was able to join me today. So before I jump into the Q&A, some housekeeping rules. The first one is, if you have a question, preface it with the word question, because the chat just keeps moving like that. There's a lot of chat coming in, and not all of it is question. So if you have a question that you'd like me to answer, put the word in bold, question, before it. So that way, once I glance at the chat, I can easily pick up the questions. All right? Housekeeping number 2, please try not to spam the chat. So don't try to ask the same question 17 different times, back to back to back to back. If I see spamming like that, sadly, I will just ignore all of it. Just ask the question once. I will try to get through the questions. If for some reason you see that I have missed your question in the mix, then you can re-ask the question. But try not to spam back to back to back to back the same questions. All right? Lastly, try to keep your questions as short and clear as possible. So I don't want to have to read through a paragraph of information before I get to your question. Just keep the question short and to the point and clear, so I don't have to guess what you're trying to ask. All right? Because I'm trying to get through as many questions as possible, so the clearer your question, the more concise your question, the quicker I can give you a more targeted response. All right, and go. Let's do it. Where you guys are? What's your struggles? What can I help you with today? It could be on any topic relating to music. That's my expertise. So if you have weight loss problems, unfortunately, I can't help you with that. Can't help you with the relationship questions either. Or your money problem questions if you have those. Just keep it to piano lessons. All right, I see first questions come in from John. And John says, in tritone, is tritone only to play in churches? Because some people say it's the devil's chords. I've heard that terminology before, the devil's chords, and that's pure garbage from my perspective. There is no such thing as the devil's chord and Jesus chord. Doesn't exist. It's all music, right? And how you use music, that's all that matters. You can use music to praise yourself, or you can use music to worship, to uplift others, and to give glory and honor to God. That's it. There's no such thing as a devil's chord. When I was growing up in the church, I grew up in the Adventist church, Seventh-day Adventist church in Jamaica. And when I was growing up as a child, the drum was not acceptable in church. You could not bring a drum set in the church. It was seen as an ungodly instrument. Looking back now, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, what? Drum wasn't accepted. You could bring an organ, you could bring any instrument. If you bring a bass guitar, you gotta make sure it turned all the way down, and the bass man would do a little thing, but no form of drums. Can you imagine? I mean, we're Africans from African descent, which is a very rhythmic culture, a very drum-oriented culture. I'm talking about Jamaicans now. And for some reason, we've been indoctrinated that drums were not for worship. A lot of that has changed right now. A lot of Adventist church now has full band. But back in the day, not so long ago, the drum was looked upon as not a worship instrument. And also, a lot of churches back then too, anything beyond a triad was seen as not worship chords. So you couldn't be using major sevenths and major ninths and tritones, none of that stuff. And the reason they hold that mindset was because it reminded them too much of jazz music, of R&B music. And in their mind, those music or secular music doesn't belong in church. So anything that reminds them of that kind of music, they say it's not worship music. But a lot of church has abolished those ideas, abandoned those thoughts. Some churches probably still do, but my perspective, all of that is nonsense. There's no such thing as a devil's chord or a devil's instrument. It's about your intention of the music you're playing and what you're trying to do. That's it. All right, let me go back up to see if I missed anything. Question from Falade John. He says, please, sir, I'd like you to explain pertaining reharmonization. That question wasn't too quite clear because reharmonization is a huge topic. So you want to ask question on a specific section or topic of reharmonization, but in the sort of blanket, entire sort of spectrum, reharmonization is just mean you start to either add additional chords to the song you're playing, or you start to substitute chords. One of the popular form of reharmonization that we use, especially in modern gospel, is passing chords. Passing chords create avenues for you to add additional chords. You can also start to reharmonize chords by the use of chord extensions. So instead of playing a mere triad, you can start to use extending the triads to create additional sound. That's a reharmonization. By the way, can you guys hear the piano? I'll just give you a quick example. I just shot a tutorial a few days ago on Waymaker by Sinach, and that's going to be available in the membership area over at Piano Lesson with Warren in about a day or two. But I showed you guys in that tutorial breakdown how to play the beginner's chords. start making the chords. Major 7. You know? See, I'm starting to reharmonize the song. All of that stuff. You see, the song starts to open up and the chord starts to get more big and pretty. And I can go further and further down that rabbit hole to create more harmonization. So in a nutshell, that's basically what reharmonization is. It's a very big topic, so it's not something that can be explained in one lesson because there are different types of reharmonizations, different avenues, different paths you can take. Okay. Question from Eduardo. Says, I'm a little tired of so much exercise. You have a video of how to accompany the left hand with a solo in the right hand. I don't have a specific video on that, but I do have a video on popular left-hand chord patterns, and I'm going to pull that up right now. I do have a video on popular left-hand chord patterns because when it comes to right-hand improv, you're going to need to rework the way you're playing chords in the left hand. So I'm just looking up that tutorial right now, and I'm going to shoot you the link in the chat. But that's a great tutorial to study because once you have a good understanding of the left hand, then you can start to better craft improv lines and licks for the right hand. All right, so here you go. So I just post that link in the chat so you can check out that video, Eduardo. Question from Ethan. He says, what passing chord can I use to get to my 4 in the key of G major? And the easiest one, or the most popular one, is to do a 2-5 passing. So I'm in the key of G major, and I want to get to my 4, which is C major. So you can do a 2-5 passing. And the 2-5 passing, I'm going to play a D minor, a G 13th. You can make the G anything, and then that takes me to C. When using this in the context of a song, you will have to rework the voicing and the rhythm to match what's going on in the song. You know, you have to tweak it a little bit. You can't just use the same voicing all the time or the same rhythm because, you know, remember that when we're adding these passing chords to the song, you have to complement the song. That's the whole idea of adding these chords, to complement the song, make it bigger, better, sounds more in depth. It's not to take away and make the song sounds bad. So whatever song you're going to use it in, you might have to do some tweaking, but that's the basic concept. A 2-5 passing, a G minor, a D minor, a G7, and a C major. And you can make your G all sorts of extensions. You know, you can do. So that's one thing you can do. All right, let me see. Question from Angela. She says, as a beginner, what can I do to get the gospel sound? So I always tell people who are new to gospel music is, especially if you did not grow up in a gospel church and all that, now you're trying to get into the sound and the playing, you start with listening. You need to be consuming 1 to 2 hours minimum of gospel music every week. If you can do half hour of gospel music listening every day, do that. But you first want to get the sound in here before you get it in here. You know, a lot of the little nuances that we do in gospel with the little runs, the way we play the chords, the rhythms we use, a lot of that stuff can only be learned through listening to a lot of that kind of music. Just as how you talk about accents. I mean, I'm in the northeast of the United States, way up north, Portland, Maine. But when I go down south, when I go to places like Alabama, Texas, even some places of Florida, the accent is thick and unique, that thick southern accent. If someone say, I want to learn that southern accent, first thing they need to do is to start listening to a whole bunch of people speaking with that accent. So you can start to embody that sound. Now it's the same thing for music. If you want to learn jazz, if you want to learn classical, if you want to learn reggae, salsa, gospel, whatever style of music you want to learn or genre of music, it first start with consuming hours and hours of recording from those music. That's the first thing. Second thing is once you get beyond your major scales, your major triads, you need to start mastering the use of dominant seventh chords. Gospel is born out of blues. Blues stems from a lot of dominant seventh chords. Dominant seventh chords. So as a beginner, your next step after learning triads and learning a major scale is to dive into blues scales and everything dominant seventh chords. So those are the two-step process that I would say start working on those for now. Then once you finish with that, we can talk about other things to do. Question from Pablo says, can you give ideas to the aux piano for the main from the main piano? Play the hymnal verbatim SATB. Okay, so I believe I understand what you're asking. Aux piano, when someone say aux piano, they're talking about if there are two keyboard players and one is playing piano, second keyboard player may be playing organ or strings or some pads, something like that. So he's asking about ideas to use when playing that sort of aux style piano. Unfortunately, Pablo, this is not something I can demonstrate right now because I only have one sound pulled up right now, which is the piano. And for you to be able to get a better understanding of this, you'll need to hear things in context. So you would need to have a piano sound going, and then I would need to have some strings or something going. So this is actually a great idea for me to do a tutorial on so I can demonstrate this. So I'm going to put this in my notes to shoot a tutorial on it because yeah, there's some rules to follow if you're doing like strings, playing strings as second piano, or playing pads or organ. And why there are some rules is because when you're playing second piano, you gotta think of yourself as like a backup singer to the main singer. You can't be louder than the main singer. The backup singer can't be overpowering the main singer. And the backup singer definitely don't need to be singing every line of the song. So with auxiliary playing, it's a similar role. You don't need to be playing all the chords as the main keyboard player. You definitely don't want to be as loud as the main keyboard player. And in a lot of places, you want to sort of get out of the way to leave room so the frequencies are not clashing. So you don't always play in the same register. So again, that's something that I would need to explain in the form of a tutorial because it does require a more practical application so you can hear things in context. For later, John says, okay, did answer that question. Epion system says, how do I practice extended chords? Well, Epion, I do have some great courses over at Piano Lesson with Warren that teaches you how to play various extended chords in all 12 keys. That would be the best place I would send you. Head over to Piano Lesson with Warren and check out those chords, because when you think about practicing extended chords, you want to think about practicing those chords in the context of a progression, so you can see how the chords sound and work with voicing. You know, because if I say, take the C13th chord right here. When we practice the C13 chord, we don't just practice it like that, like C13th, F13th, B flat 13th. You know, that's not really an effective way. You want to practice it in the form of a progression. So you do something like 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1. You know, the best way, practice it in the form of 2, 5, 1s. Or so 2, 5, 1 is the best way, and my course on this concept not only covers 2, 5, 1, but it covers different types of progression. So you see how these chords work in the context of those progressions. And just for those who are just joining, just a quick housekeeping again. If you have a question, put the word question in bold before you ask the question. This way, my eyes can readily catch it in the chat. Question from Lyndon Richardson. He says, how can I improve my playing in Caribbean Medley? So that's a little bit too specific to the point where I don't know how to answer it. Because Caribbean Medley is the Donnie McClurkin tune, right? Is that what you're talking about? If that's the song you're talking about, when you say improve your playing, you got to give me something to work with. I'm not sure exactly what you mean. Improve your playing could mean many things. Many things. So I'm not going to speculate. Mariah says, when do you use drop 2 voicing? Honestly, Mariah, I don't know, because drop 2 is not a huge part of my arsenal of technique that I use. I don't really use a lot of drop 2s. In fact, I probably use drop 2 like 2% of the time. It's not one of those things that I use a lot. And I don't, because in a lot of cases, I find myself playing solo piano, or I gotta play bass with my left hand. And when you're playing drop 2, a lot of the times, you gotta ignore bass, you know? It works great when you have a bass player. A lot of times I don't have a bass player, so that's why it's not something I use a lot. Drop 2 is an advanced concept. To be honest, you wanna know about drop 2, Corey Taylor would be the guy to contact. I had him on this channel a few months ago where he talked about drop 2, and that's something he uses a lot. He would be the guy to ask about this concept. David, or is it David? I think David. He says, I need some more tips for old school gospel blues. So David, again, I'm going to refer you to my tutorials at pianolessonwithwarren.com. And that's because I have such a vast catalog of song breakdown tutorials that covers a lot of different tips. So if you want more tips and that stuff, check that out. Because I'm not going to be able to give you anything substantial right now. If you're playing old school, you definitely want to have your dominant 7 chords down. And you need to be very familiar with your blues scales and pentatonic scales, because we use those 2 scales in conjunction with each other. But it starts from just knowing those two things, the dominant 7 chords, blues scales, pentatonic scales, and then from there you're going to start building licks, lines, and runs from those scales. If that's not something you have done before, then you want to start to study some of those licks and lines from like some of my tutorials that covers that stuff. The best way to learn any form of improvisation, chord voicing, chord usage is to watch and study someone else do it. Learning this stuff in just isolated theory is not enough. You need to see how these things manifest in actual playing, actual songs. And this is the stuff I gave you guys over at pianolessonwithwarren.com. You can also find a lot of that just right here on YouTube in my videos. A lot of videos covering little stuff like that. Question from Ebenezer. He says, how can I really use major and minor 7th chords in my playing? I'm going to tell you the same thing I tell, was it Epion? Is to practice them in 2-5-1 progressions. 2-5-1. Get used to them in basic 2-5-1 progression. 2-5-1. And then you can move on to say 3-6-2-5-1. Or you can do 1-4-5-1. Or you can do 4-1-5-6. So there are a lot of progressions you can come up with to practice different chord voicings and movement. However, if you need a little bit more hand holding on exactly which note should I play in my right hand and my left hand, which voicing best work, again, lots of information on this stuff over at pianolessonwithwarren.com. Question from Music Hangout with Kelvin. He says, I am requesting you to explain how I can make my gospel music more jazzy. You want to make your gospel music more jazzy, you have to start using extended chords. Major 9s, minor 7s, dominant 9s, and the altered extended chords. That's it. You know, I always like to use the example of Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace, how sweet. I'm just using triads. The sound that saved a wretch like me. Triads. Doesn't sound that much jazzy. But what if I start to extend the chords? Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. So by the use of extended chords, the songs start to sound a little more jazzy. And once we start to use extended chords, then that also opens up the possibility for us to use passing chords. So those are the two things, the use of extended chords, the use of passing chords, and that will start to open up the chords to sound more jazzy. Emmanuel says, how do I form runs from chords? I see folks do it a lot. So when you're playing runs over your chord, there's two things at play. One, scales. Two, arpeggios. That's it. Now, which scale to use and which arpeggios to use, that's the $1 million question. If I'm playing a C major 7, I can play a C major chord over it. I can also use C Phrygian. I mean, C Lydian. The Lydian is the fourth mode of the major scale. In this case, the fourth mode of G major. So it's like playing a G major scale starting on C. So if I'm doing a 2-5-1 in the key of C and I'm doing 2 major 7, I mean 1 major 7, 2 minor 7, and what if when I go to my 5, I'm playing this altered chord right here? Right? I'm playing a G7, G13 flat 9. So I'm going to play the G in rootless voicing just so you see. So I'm playing it without the G, then I go back to my 1. So remember when we're on the 1, I can use that Lydian. When I go to my G, so when I go here, I can play. This is called a Phrygian dominant. If I start from the E, and the Phrygian dominant is just the 5th mode of the minor scale. So in other words, A minor. You see how crazy it starts to get? So when you ask what licks and runs I can play over my chords, it is not a simple answer. It does require the understanding of various scales beyond major scale, and it does understanding which chords coincide with those scales. So now I can have enough of that. Let me see. Falade says, please sir, can you explain how to use 7th chords? I believe I answered that question already. Question from SVP Keys. He says, can you give me an easier way to do preaching chords? I want to understand the idea behind it. Okay, so the basic idea of preaching chords, and this is the same for all keys, it's the template that gospel musicians work from. We use the 1, the major 3, the 4, the sharp 4, and the 5. That's the template. Whenever you hear preaching chord, doesn't matter how crazy and advanced it sounds, at the core, that's the template they're working from. The 1, the major 3, the 4, the sharp 4, and the 5. Now, how they get from that to the crazy stuff you hear guys be doing on the organ is that, for one, they start to extend the use of these chords. They're not playing triads. These are all extended chords. 2, players start to use passing chords to create additional movements to get to these chords. So if I'm playing in the key of C and I'm doing this 1 chord, pastor's preaching, oh, 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 yeah, and you're just messing around that blues scale, then they might move up. See now when I'm playing on my 3 chord, then or you can start to make these all kind of stuff, or and the Lord said, let there be rain. Yeah, yeah. might go to 6. Yeah. Oh. But at the core, it's just that the 1, 3, 4, sharp 4 to 5. And then from there, they can start to extend the chords. They can create loops. So instead of 5, going back to 1, they might sometimes go back to the 1 chord and they just play it like that. Give you that nice sort of suspension, dominant 7. Instead of going back to that, sometimes they might just go to the 3 again. Then to the 4. Sharp 4. 5. Sometimes they might play that for a 5, which is just a altered chord again. A sharp 9, sharp 5. And sometimes they may move it from here to the 2. Then they might do a sharp 3. Then we might do 3 for the 1 in first inversion. Then I've even heard cats go from here to the flat 7. Flat 6. To the 5. So, there's so many different variations, but at its core, they're not losing sight of the 1, 3, 4, sharp 4, 5. And again, this is a theoretical part of it. You have to be following the pastor, and this is the most important thing because every pastor is different. You got to be watching. You got to know your pastor when he needs you to intensify. Some pastor likes to modulate multiple times. You got to know when he's there. He's calling for that modulation. So the preaching chord thing, once you sort of understand the basic chord structure, it's a matter of now just flowing with the pastor, which involves watching him, seeing what he's doing. When you need to be doing straight jabs. Mm-hmm. Da 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 da. Yeah. Da da da. Uh-huh. Da da. Mm-hmm. Opposed to when you need to be holding the chords. Yeah. 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 So, you kind of have to play with it and know. Like I said, every pastor is different. But that's sort of the core of preaching chords right there. Let me see. Gideon says, how can I develop my ear? And Gideon, I have a tutorial right here on YouTube that does shed some very important tips that all musicians need to be practicing. And while we're on the topic of ear training, I haven't really put this out there yet, but I'm in the process of developing an ear training app because the best way I have found to practice ear training, modern technology to help you to practice ear training, is in the form of an app. And so I did a scan of some of the apps available on the App Store. Some are good, some are just not that great, and some are just not really designed for practical ear training because you need to see how the ear training is helpful in practical situations. And this is what a lot of those apps doesn't cover. It's like, do this, sing that, do that. But you're like, okay, how do I use this in practical situations? So I decided, what? Why not just create my own app? So I have a developer who is currently creating that for me. And in a few months, it should be ready. So I just post that in the chat for you, Gideon. That's a great tutorial right there that give you some practical tips to start to work on your ear training. But the app is going to be bomb. It's going to be fire. But because it's going to cover all the things that I have pinpointed over the past 17 years in my own development that is crucial for those who want to be able to play by ear. So the app's going to cover all of that stuff. Herbert asked how to play second keyboard, and I did answer a question on that earlier. So Herbert, I would say catch the replay. In about a day after the video goes live, after I complete the chat, if you check back after a day or so, I will have all the question asked listed below. And they're going to have timestamps. So if you want to see my response to a specific question, you can just click on that and it will take you there, so you don't have to sit and watch the entire video. But it will take my assistant some time to get that prepared for you guys, so give us about a day. Question from Ethan. He says, what voice can you recommend for altar call moments? By voice, do you mean specific sort of like piano patch? What I like to use for altar call is I like a piano mixed with strings and a pad. And I actually have a tutorial here on YouTube on altar call. That would be a great tutorial for you to check out some of the chords I use and just how I play it, the sound that I have. So that's sort of like my go-to. I don't get too fancy. In general, I'm not into crazy gadgets. Like I see some people set up for church and it's insane. I mean, it's dope, but I'm not into all that technology. I just like simple stuff. I like to be able to split my keyboard and play bass. I like to be able to layer my keyboard with at least 3 sounds, and that's it. I don't need any other fancy gadgets and device. Just too distracting for me personally. So here's a tutorial on altar call. Just post that in the chat. Ethan. So Ethan's the one that asked that question. Question from Trey. He says, I'm 17 and a church musician, been playing for 1.5 years. There's still quite a few things I need to learn. How do I manage the time to learn other genres, etc., R&B and jazz? So, Trey, one, if you're following me, you know that I only just focus on gospel music. That's all I teach. And those are the people I want to help. So you need to ask yourself, what is more important to you? Bettering your gospel music playing, in terms of learning more songs, better songs, all of that. Or do you want to get into jazz, gospel, jazz and R&B? Now, I'm not saying don't play jazz or don't play R&B. I'm not saying that. In fact, if that stuff interests you, you should learn it. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But you want to prioritize in terms of what is most important to you. At 17, man, you should have a lot of time in your hands. You know what I mean? I wish I had the amount of time I had at 17, 18, even when I was 25. Wish I had that much time. At 17, you should have a lot of time on your hands, yeah? You're what, just getting ready to graduate high school? You should just be investing every time you have right now in music. Jazz, gospel, R&B, whatever you want to learn, because there will come a time when you have to have a day job, you're going to have kids, maybe, or a wife, maybe, or I'm not sure if or a husband, I don't know, am I speaking with doesn't matter. You're going to have a family, you're going to have a job, and you find out that you don't have as much time as you did when you're 17. So probably turn off the TV, put down the video games, and just invest more time in music, you know? Because, you know, the reality is when it comes to this concept of time, It's one of the biggest things people tell me. I don't have time to study the courses. I don't have time to practice. But at the end of the day, it's all about what is important to you. If it's important to you, you will make time. If it's not important to you, then you're always going to continue to find excuses. I'm not saying you're going to have time every day, every week, every month, every year to just do nothing else but music. No. But if 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months passing you by and you continue to say you don't have the time, something else might be going on there. I'm going to call you out on that and say maybe you're just finding excuses. You have to prioritize what is most important. A lot of people say, I don't have time, but yet still you have time to catch up on the latest season of the next new show on Netflix. You have time to watch every sporting games. I'm just saying, what is important to you? If you really study your schedule, everything you do for the week, you're going to find that, I could probably spend less time here. Or I could probably just spend less time watching TV, less time playing video games, less time scrolling Facebook and Instagram. Because I always tell people, all you need a day is 30 minutes. If you can find 30 minutes a day to practice, in 6 months, you're going to see huge results. You can't find 30 minutes in a day? So that's my answer to that, Trey. So Music Hangout with Kelvin says, which exercise can I use to play? Whoa, my chat just refresh and I lost the comment I was reading. Let me scroll back up to see if I can get to that. Not sure why the page refresh. Okay, I think I'm getting there now. I'm sorry. I really did lost my space. The page refreshed and I don't even know. Oh, here it is. Music Hangout with Kelvin says, which exercise can I use to play good runs? The exercises that I always recommend people practice, whether you're beginner, intermediate, or you think you're advanced, you're not beyond these exercises. Scales. Your scales is what's going to help you to know automatically which fingering to use when you're doing runs. Major scales, minor scales, blues scale, pentatonic scale, diminished scales. Start just practicing scales. Arpeggios. That's going to help you to play arpeggios. Blocked chords and broken chords. Those are my exercises. Scales, arpeggios, blocked chords, broken chords. Those are the exercises that I practice and have been practicing for over 10 years. I don't practice nothing else. Those are my technique building exercises. And if you want specific fingering for all these stuff I just talked about, I have lessons on each of these concepts over at pianolessonwithwarren.com. We have a question, and I think the name is written in Chinese, so unfortunately, I can't pronounce it. But he or she says, do you think people would be more musically creative if we were only taught the chromatic scale? Nope. Because in Western music, music belongs to a scale. We're either playing in a major key or playing in a minor key. That's Western music. Then we can use additional scale to create embellishments, like the blues scales, diminished scales, pentatonic scales, the different types of modes or jazz scales. So if you just learn the chromatic scale, you're not really learning music in context. And context is everything. Question from Charles Smith. He says, using a circle of fifth as a reference, is there a mental shortcut to finding the tritone substitution of a given chord? The shortcut, Charles, is the tritone, the augmented fourth. The tritone is located an augmented fourth above the given chord. So if I say, what is the tritone of C7, you're going to count up an augmented fourth from C. Interval of a fourth, interval of an augmented fourth. An augmented fourth is called a tritone because there are 3 tones in the interval. 1 tone, or a whole step, 2 whole step, 3 whole step, 3 tritones. That's all it means. It's just telling you that it's an interval of 3 whole tones, tritones. So the tritone is always located an augmented fourth above the chord. Question from Epion. He says, how do I practice extend? I did answer that question already. Question from Falade. I want to learn jazz piano. Please, I need advice. I believe I also answered that question already. Question from Leno Grace. Is that Leno Grace says, how do you come up with these right-hand chords when you play tritone? Well, for one, I practice voicing. I practice voicings. So I don't just come up with this stuff on the spot. Well, kind of, but not really. It is spontaneous, but it's something that's already in my sort of toolkit. You know, every voicing I play is voicing that I've played many times over. You know, and so that's why I talked to, I don't remember who asked a question earlier about what's the best way to practice extended chords. We call this isolated chord practice, when you take random progressions and you work on them. One of the practicing that I do, because ever since COVID hits, I sort of start practicing more frequently. One of the practicing I do, I say, okay, I pick an extended chord that I'm going to work on for today. I might say I'm working on this chord, voicing. This is a sharp 9, sharp 5. Now I can play this chord like that with that voicing, or I can play it like that with that voicing. It's the same chord, it's just voiced differently. So then I might say I'm practicing 2-5-1. This is the voicing I'm practicing on all my 5 chord. 2-5-1 in the key of B flat. 2-5-1 in the key of A flat. 2-5-1 in the key of D flat. Again, that voicing, that's the same voicing. So if you look at how I have it, I have my sharp 9 up here, my 7, my sharp 5, my 3rd, my 7 again doubled, and my root. So I make sure that on all my chords, I'm playing that same voicing. Right? My sharp 9, my sharp 5, my 7, my sharp 5, my 3rd. Same thing again, my 7, my sharp 9, my 7, my sharp 5, my 3rd. I'm practicing this voicing. So this is how when I'm playing now, I can just randomly pick different voicing at will. Because this is something I sit and I practice. Every day I pick a different chord with a different voicing. And this is how I keep these things sharp and under my belt. Then I can do the same thing, but this time with rootless voicings, you know? So that's the best way to sort of come up with these different right hand. And again, you don't have to sit and struggle through this on your own. I have courses on all of this stuff over at pianolessonwithwarren.com. All right. Question from Nelly Gold says, where to use chromatic medians as passing chords? A good place you can use chromatic medians is when going to the 4. You can use it on the 3. So if I'm doing from 1 to 4 in the key of C, I can use the E chromatic median. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can always use it as a passing chord to go to 4. You know, and so oftentimes when you hear people talk about 2/5 passing, you can even add the chromatic median on it. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can do. So I did a 2/5 chromatic median to 4. Music Hangout says it's an honor you were in the SDA church. I am also SDA. Yeah, my brother and my sister, they still go to the SDA church. I don't anymore. And honestly, one of the big reasons was because of their views on music. I live, breathe, man, and sleep music. So when you're going to start telling me that certain music is devil's music, I can't roll with that mindset. So I stopped going. You know, they talk about no drums and all. I can't do that stuff. Can't do that stuff. But no, I got nothing against SDA, just so you know. I just realized it wasn't for me. My grandmother was SDA. My grandfather was SDA. My father was SDA before he stopped going to church. My entire family was SDA. My older sister was the first one to peace out. She left for various reasons. Wasn't music related, but I left because of the music thing. I wanted to have a band in church. I wanted to be able to play all kind of chords and play all kind of styles without someone telling me that I'm playing secular music or I'm playing devil's music. I couldn't roll with that stuff. All right. Question from Cason Music Academy. He says, Warren, were you classically trained or jazzically trained? And what are the differences between the two? Which do you prefer? So I was classically trained. I actually have a degree. My college degree is in music, specifically in classical piano performance. That's what I went to school for. I spent 4 years in Jamaica at Edna Manley College of the Visual and Performing Arts. Studied classical piano there. Then when I came to the States, I went to the University of Southern Maine where I did a degree in classical piano performance. So I spent 8 years in university. Way longer than I really wanted to. But it was a free scholarship, so I stuck around. While I was a classical piano major, I did take some jazz classes. I took jazz theory, jazz harmony. I took some jazz combo classes, played, all those jazz tunes because I was always interested in jazz. To be honest, the reason why I did not change to become a jazz major, the jazz teacher wasn't that good. Shh. Don't say that, I said it. They didn't really have a good jazz teacher. Every semester it was some new guy they'd bring in teaching jazz. There was no stability. But my classical piano teacher was top notch. And for those of you guys, I brought her on the channel 2 months ago or so. Just interview her. She's the one why the reason my technique is so good. She really transformed my playing. In terms of, first of all, I don't think either is better. Jazz is not better than classical, and classical is not better than jazz. It's about your preference, right? Classical does provide some things that you won't get in jazz. Like for one, I really think classical challenges your technique. You can't play classical music if you got sloppy technique. So it forces you to improve your technique, forces you to learn how to read music, which is very important if you are planning on making music a career. If you want to be a professional pianist, learning to read is going to be important. Classical forced me to learn all of that because I started learning how to play by ear first. So when I got into music school now, I was like, oh my God, I got to learn how to read. So I was forced to do it, and I'm really glad I did. Classical also, it expands your concentration and your way of thinking, because a typical jazz tune is 3 minutes, and then you might spend another 2-3 minutes doing some solos. So the span of a jazz tune, 6-7 minutes tops. In college, I had to play classical pieces that were 30 minutes long. I'm talking about one piece. Sitting there for 30 minutes playing one piece from memory really push your concentration and ability to focus. And it forces you to learn music in a different way. Because when you're playing a 30-minute piece from memory, you're not just regurgitating notes. You have to know the piece inside and out from a theoretical perspective. So you know at any given time what section of the piece you're on. So all of those things really helped to form my musicality as a musician. Okay. In question from Star Guy, aka Jazz Hands. He says, you had the echo started, but you then, okay. Echo problems back. Unfortunately, I can't address that right now. I think I'm going to use a different streaming platform next time. I'm using OBS, and I do have another streaming software that I've gotten better results from, so I'm just going to go back to that in the future. A question from Akunma says, I'm having problem freestyling with chords in the right hand. What tips can you advise? So the fact that you're not able to freestyle with chords in the right hand means you're not that comfortable with your chords or the chord progressions yet. It's a matter of comfort. You know, when you see someone playing and they're doing all kind of chords in the right hand and voicing, mixing with licks, it's not by random. I know exactly what I'm playing. But I am so free with it because I know the chords in the right hand so well. I mean, think of when you're speaking. You don't really have to stop to think about which word you're going to use. It's just flow. Your ideas just manifest in words. You don't think about which word you need to use. It's the same thing when I'm playing. I'm not thinking about specific chords. I'm thinking about getting from point A to point B, and my brain and my hands just filling the gap with what chords to do. I was only able to get to that level through continual practicing and getting better with my chords and my voicings and my progressions. Question from Nathan says, can you use a tritone and a diminished chord at the same time to go to a triad? Well, the tritone, first thing you guys need to know that the whole tritone thing, it's a concept. Tritone substitution is a concept. It's a rule that says you can substitute a given chord with a chord, a tritone away from that given chord. Example, I can substitute C7 with F sharp tritone. That chord right there, I can substitute it with that. In terms of what I want my tritone chord to be, could be anything. So I can extend it to be a 7 flat 9 chord. You know, let me see. I could play this, I could play that. So if you look over here, I have a diminished chord, but over here, it's really just a flat 9 chord. So I can do. It sounds a bit empty if I just drop to a mere triad, but if I do, then it sounds more smooth and resolved. So you gotta be careful when you're using tritone subs and all these chords. You can't just play an advanced chord and then resolve it to a triad. It sounds, because remember, if you, in this chord, I'm playing a 7, I'm playing a flat 9. If I just resolve it to a triad, then what happens to the 7 and the flat 9? Those sounds need to also get resolved. So that's why you can't typically resolve these big chords to a mere triad without it not sounding empty, because those tension sounds in the chord also needs to be resolved. So I can resolve my 7 to here. I can resolve this to here, that to here, that to here, that to here. So then I have, so sounds need to resolve. You can't just let sounds run abstract like that. It's going to sound funny. A.B. Gray says, is it normal to use blues chords in everywhere? No. Blues chords, like dominant 7th, is going to give you a bluesy sound. So if the song doesn't require a bluesy sound, and you start adding bluesy sound, it's going to sound like you're mixing oil and water. It's not going to work. Question from Frank says, any gospel song on minor scales? There are. One that jumps to mind is it's a Christmas song. Da 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 da. How's it go again? I can't remember the title of the song, and I'm playing it. Haste, haste to bring in blood the sun, da 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 da. I can't remember the title of the song. Someone tell me the title. But some of you guys may recognize that that Christmas song. We bring, what's it called again? I can't remember. But anyway, that's a one. Another one is Kirk Franklin, Why Do You Cry? That's in a minor key. There are a bunch of others. I can't remember them right now. There's quite a few. There is quite a few. Lakeland says, share some exercises for left hand, right hand independence. I do have a tutorial right here on YouTube with that. There's some interesting ways you can practice scales. Those are some interesting ways to practice scales. And I'm going to post the link in the chat, just putting it up right here on YouTube. But the best way to sort of start to work on your hand independence is playing your scales with different rhythms in each hand. Very cool way for learning scales, learning and developing hand independence. And it's moving rather slow. Okay, here we go. So I'm posting the link in the chat. Question from Drew Brown says, how do I choose which chords to use in passing? So there are two things. One, you need to know what type of passing you're doing, because as we've established, there are lots of different ways you can use passing chords. So you need to know some rules behind passing chords. Secondly, you need to know chord voicing, because remember we talk about voicings different or changes based on the song. The melody is king. Whenever you're using passing chords and reharm, you need to take note of what's happening with the melody, because the melody is going to dictate what's the best voicing to use. All right, so those are the two things. The type of passing chords being used and what's happening with the song, so you can match the voicing or change the voicing to match what's happening with the melody. If you guys really want to learn more about passing chords and you haven't, check out my course, The Secret to Passing Chords or Gospel Passing Chords in C. As yet, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. This passing chord course covers 7 types of passing chords. If you're confused about passing chords, this course will clear it up for you. It's available over at pianolessonwithwarren.com. So go check that out. Question from Abby says, how do I start training my ears, for example, knowing intervals and chords and finding the key to a song? So Abby, I posted a link right here in the chat to a tutorial that I have on YouTube here that shares some great passing and some great ear training tips. So if you look at the chat, just scroll in the chat, you'll see some links that I post. One of those links to that video. Question from Des G says, can you quickly explain diminished chromatic passing? So in a nutshell, this is going to be rough and dirty. Whenever you go into a minor chord, you can use the diminished chord that is a half step below that destination chord as passing. Prime example, if I'm playing the key of C and I'm going from a 1 to a 2, 1 to a minor 2, I can use the C sharp diminished as passing. And I see that I just lost. Ridiculous. Let me pull that up real quick. And we're back. Okay. So let me continue with that example. I can use C sharp diminished as passing because it's a half step below my destination chord. Same thing, if I'm going from 2 to 3, I can use D sharp diminished as a passing to get me to E minor. I can also use it as a passing to get me to 6. So I can do to 6. So there are other ways you can use diminished passing, but that's one of the most popular and also easiest way of using diminished passing. So Randy Stephen asked, are inversions used for better sounding music? Yes and no. Why I say yes? Because it doesn't always make it sound better. In some cases it does, especially when you get into more advanced reharm and passing chords, the inversion that you use. At that stage, we don't use the word inversion, we use the word voicing. The voicing can make or break the song at that stage. So in a way, voicing makes the music sound better. Inversions, when I hear inversions, I think of triads, which doesn't really do much with the voicing. Voicing can make or break the song when you're using extensions. Another question from Gideon, how do I develop my ear? And again, I would recommend scrolling in the chat for one of the links that I just posted. It covers ear training. Question from Nathan Escobar. He says, can you use a tritone and a diminished chord at the same time? Yeah, I believe I answered that question already. A lot of questions on tritones, so I'm skipping over them because I just answered those. Larry Darty says, is there a chart available that offers good passing chords for each key? Basic concept of how to arrive at 4 chords, 6 chords, second chord. Yes, Larry, that's what I just talked about. Gospel passing chords in C covers the key of C. We'll be coming out soon with gospel passing chords in F, and I will be doing a passing chords course for each key. But by the time you get through the passing chords course in C, you're going to learn so much. It's going to open up your understanding so much of passing chords. You're going to realize that you're going to be able to start utilize that concept in other keys. But that course will be your lifeline for passing chords. Check it out, gospel passing chords in the key of C over at pianolessonwithwarren.com. Another question from Leno says, how do you come up with these? I believe I've answered that question already. How do you practice chord extension? I've answered that one already. So I'm going to take a few more questions because I have to go soon. So if I see any questions on passing chords or chord extension, I'll skip over them because I just answered a lot of questions on those. And so for you guys, you can, if you want to see that stuff, you can catch the replay of the video that will be available as basically as soon as this live stream is finished. Question from Zachary says, I'm a teenager and I play for my church, but I found it hard to pick up songs by ear and be able to learn them. So Zachary, to ear training thing, you're not just going to wake up one morning and be able to recognize songs by ear. It's something you have to start to train your ears to develop. Again, the link that I posted in the chat to the ear training tutorial, it gives you some tips of things you need to start practicing. And for those of you guys who want to go even deeper into this thing of ear training, over at pianolessonwithwarren.com, I have an ear training course. It is a course that is challenging, but by the time you come out at the end of that course, you will know how to practice your ear training and what to practice for ear training, so you can begin to develop these skills to recognize bass line, chord progressions, chord qualities, and all of that. And in a few months, I will have an ear training app available for both Androids and iPhones, so you guys can practice ear training on the go. Question from Favorite Kitchen, interesting YouTube name. How do I practice triads in all keys? Again, I've answered this question already. The best way is in the form of progressions. What's going on, Corey? I see Corey here from Skilled Musicians. Someone asked earlier about drop two voicing, and I told him that Corey is the guy to check on that stuff. He's the guy, the go-to guy for drop twos. So you guys, y'all hail up Corey, and I see David Hutchinson in the house. Welcome, David. I had David on the channel too a few months ago. David talk about diminished chord movements. A lot of diminished chord movements that you can use when you're playing. David is a great resource for stuff like that too. Y'all check him out. Question from Akenmu says, I was told a keyboard should be able to play drums for better rhythms. Please, what's your opinion on that? A keyboardist should be able to play drums. Okay, for better rhythms. Nah, man, you don't need to play drums. You can understand the concept of rhythms and develop your rhythm without playing drums. I do believe you should start studying how drummers think and play. So just pay more attention to drummers. Because when you're playing with a drummer, oftentimes you guys need to be in sync with your syncopation stuff. So you start to listen to drummers, start to understand how beats and subdivisions work and all of that. But you don't need to physically go sit there with sticks trying to learn drums. That's not going to translate into you being a better keyboard player. But you need to be mindful. And this is, as a side note, something that goes for all instrumentalists. Not because you're a keyboard player, that doesn't mean you only focus on keyboard-related music or just keyboardists. I listen to a lot of bassists. I follow bassists online. Why? Because I play bass with my left hand. And to imitate bass players with my left hand, I need to be listening to how bass players play. Because the ergonomics and how bass is situated is different than the keyboard. And so certain patterns that is more native for bass playing is not native for keyboard playing. And so for us to get into the mindset of a bassist, you need to be listening to bassists. So I follow a lot of bass channels on Instagram and YouTube. I follow drummers, so I think like a drummer. You know, I follow vocalists, I follow horn players, I follow string players. You gotta listen to all type of instruments. Because when you sit at the piano to play, a lot of times you're imitating those instruments. When we talk about playing auxiliary instruments, second keyboard players, a lot of the time you're playing strings. If you don't listen to any form of string orchestral music or how the strings are being used in a song, how are you going to imitate that stuff? If you have to play some flutes or some horns, you know? A lot of times, guys have to play like horn lines with patches, you know? So you got to be listening wide. When you're listening to a recording, don't just listen to the keyboard player. Listen to everybody. See what's going on. Great question. All right, I'm going to take 2 more questions, unfortunately, guys. You know, as always, there's no way I can possibly get through all the questions you guys have because there's a lot of y'all. That's why I like to do at least once a month these live stream sessions so I can get questions from you guys. I'm looking for a question on a topic that I have not answered yet. Now y'all have me singing Christmas songs. It's weird. I'm seeing a lot of the questions and answers coming back up. I don't know if they were posted twice. So I'm seeing a lot of the same questions. That's why I'm scrolling. A lot of the same questions that I've answered already. All right, here's a sort of different one. Question from Keystone Music Academy said, what scale can I use to improvise over A minor? So generally, when you're playing a minor chord, you can play A minor blues. A minor blues is also, not A minor blues, yes, A minor blues. It's also closely related to C, major pentatonic, and minor pentatonic. So that's C major pentatonic. You can use that. You can use also, that's C. You can use C minor pentatonic, but you got to be careful with how you're using those blue notes, so it's a little bit more out there. You can definitely use the minor scale, that's a given. So that's a harmonic minor scale. So that's just 3 scales right off the bat you can use. But remember that as the chords change, it's going to open up the possibility to use other scale. But that's just scales you can use on one chord, you know, because if I'm playing an A minor to a D7, when I go to the D7, then I can go the D mixolydian, which basically is just playing like a G major scale. One last question. I'm going to take one last question. And this question is from I'm just going to take this last question from Tato. He says, "Hey Warren, just want to know what is gospel chops." Gospel chops. It's just it's a slang, a phrase that gospel musicians use to talk about your technique. How good is your technique? Your gospel chops. You know, that's it. It's technique. When someone say your chops, they're talking about your technique. That was a short one, so I guess I could probably take another question. Here's another question. This is going to be my last question. How many hours a day should I practice? I get this question from time to time, and it's not about the amount of hours you spend practicing, it's about how you utilize those hours. Goes back to what to practice, how to practice. If you don't know these 2 things yet, then it doesn't matter if you're practicing 8 hours a day, you're not going to see much results. You need to figure out what to practice and how to practice. And if you guys don't know that stuff yet, then you need to download my free practice templates. That will give you some direction and guidance on what to practice and how to practice. Now, once you figure out what to practice and how to practice, then you practice as long as you want. In that case, then you're going to start to see, the more you practice, the more you're going to see results. But really and truly, it is not about the amount of hours. The amount of hours has nothing to do with how well you'll improve. It's about how you utilize those practice time. For those of you who are saying you don't have enough time, so I just posted a link to, the practice template. I just posted a link. let me repost it here. So it's not about the time, guys. And for those of you who are saying you don't have the time, make time. You gotta be hungry for this thing. You gotta be aggressively hungry. You can't just casually sit on the sideline and say, I'm not improving, I'm not making progress in my playing. Nah, man, you gotta grab this thing by the horns and take it. I wanna get better. I'm gonna find time and I'm going to invest, whether it's finding out exactly what I need to do. Because here's the thing, this is what's beating a lot of people. They go on YouTube and they spend 2 hours scrolling 17 different channels, figuring out what to learn. That is the most ineffective way to move the needle. Now, YouTube is a great resource. I have learned tons of stuff from YouTube. But YouTube is only great for picking up little tips and tricks. You go and you pick up a little lick that you can add to your playing. You go and you learn a new chord that you can add to your playing. But it's not a place for cohesive learning. So if you're a beginner, you've never taken piano lessons, and you want to know exactly what to practice, how to practice in a systematic way, so in 5 years you can see growth, you're not going to get that detailed information and guidance scrolling 17 different channels. It's just not going to work. Right? So the first thing you need to do is to figure out a way where you can get the information you need. This is why I created pianolessonwithwarren.com. For people who have limited amount of time, so they don't have time to sit there scrolling through 2 hours of videos, limited amount of time. So if you only can find half hour a day, what are you going to do with that half hour? Over at Piano Lesson with Warren, you know that once you log in, you know what courses you should be working on and the order you should be working on. Everything is laid out for you. And this is how you begin to regain your time. So you're not fiddling all over the internet searching, how do I use passing chords? How do I use passing chords? And you're finding 60 different videos on passing chords. Some's garbage, some's going too fast, some is not detailed enough. It's frustration. Remember that you have a limited amount of not only time, but also mental ability to focus. So if you spend an hour out of that mental time you have to scroll videos, even by the time you do come up on a video that you like, you're just tired from scrolling through so many other videos that you're just not even in the right mind frame to learn anything much. So that's what I want to leave with you guys today. Just know that time is what you make it. You can decide to have more time or not, and you can decide to use your time more wisely or not. All right? Utilize your time wisely. And just want to thank you guys for, again, jumping online with me in the middle of the day. I know for a lot of you guys, especially in the Middle East, Asia, and the UK, Africa, it's super late for you guys, so I do appreciate you taking the time out to stay up, to hang out with me. You guys asked some great questions today. Again, apologize not being able to get through every single questions. But remember that for those of you, especially who came on the live late, the video will be available for replay. A few minutes after I end, you will see the video, you'll be able to watch the replay. And also within a day, I will have all the questions categorized, listed, and I will post it in the description of the video and also in the chat. It will be time-stamped, so once you click on the sort of timestamp for each question, it will jump to that section of the video, and you can see my response to each question. All right, so thanks again for joining me. Until then, keep listening, keep singing, and keep practicing, because this is how you'll continue to grow as a musician. Y'all have a wonderful Thursday morning or Wednesday evening, wherever you're coming at. And I will catch you guys next week. All right? Bye for now.